Swamiji, you can start. Chidanandji, you can unmute and start.
Namaste, good evening. We often wonder why we remain in a state of disorder, why certain self-contradictory thoughts, words, and deeds do not leave us, why life seems to be highly messed up, and why, a number of whys, when many of us have read a lot, many of us are presumably quite intelligent. Many times the messages are written on the wall and we read them, and yet why don't we change? The topic that we have taken up for this evening's session of dialogue comes to the point in this matter. It hits at the right spot, the hammer comes down on the right point, and that is, we are unduly defensive. Even when we know that I am not all right, we move heaven and earth to somehow find a way of seeing things where we are right and the other person is wrong. The self is a self-sustained activity. The self is so fond of itself, and one of its most fundamental attempts all the time is to protect itself. The last thing that the self ever wants is its destruction. Call it the self, call it the ego, call it false prestige, polished by some other name. There is something in the psychology of every one of us where at a given point of time we would want to see our way as right and others' way as wrong if it is opposed to ours. If others' views are in line with our views, that is time to celebrate. But the moment we see that we are different from someone else, without blinking, without batting an eyelid, we take the side of what we call our view. Do it my way or hit the highway, goes an expression. This evening's topic is vulnerability. Vulnerability has been explained or given the meaning in dictionaries as a state of being defenseless. Call it defenseless or call it having very poor defense. It's like the forts that kings used to build. In a certain instance, in the good old stories, it was said a king had built a very strong fort. The walls were the opposite of vulnerable. Nobody could break them. But thinking that no enemies would come from another direction where there is no village or no habitat, he had left certain portion of the walls of that fort in that other direction vulnerable. Because to build a very strong wall, you have to invest more. The labor is more. The cost of material is more. Whereas to leave some portions of the 360 degrees fort weak, knowingly, saves expenses, saves time, saves labor. And he presumed no one would attack at that place. In the present context, where we are asking, can vulnerability be a virtue? Can being defenseless ever be a virtue? In 9 out of 10 contexts in life, vulnerability is right away equated with being weak, being easily subject to damage, destruction, and ruin. Who wants to be ruined? Nobody wants to die. Therefore, vulnerable is not a good word in most instances, in most contexts. That is where the matter requires closer attention. Krishnamurti ji had said, be vulnerable. He said, truth is like a robber, and the robber comes and wants to enter your house. But alas, the walls of your house are so strong, so hard, so robust that the robber of truth returns empty-handed. He cannot get in. Now, once you say this analogy of robber is for truth, you and I would say, oh, we want truth to enter our life. And that is where, if we really want truth to enter our life, that robber to get into our house, then we need to have walls that can be easily broken by truth. The walls have to be vulnerable. So, if you take the second line of the topic, can being defenseless be a virtue? The answer is it can be, in the context of the deepest transformation of our being. In fact, in a certain organization called Landmark, some of you may be familiar with that. They hold certain programs and they believe in facilitating introspection. Landmark Foundation facilitates the participants of their programs to know themselves better, and for that they employ very many ways. A participant is asked to pick up a partner. So let's say there are 800 participants in a weekend program of Landmark Foundation. They divide them into 400 pairs. Everyone has a partner, and that pair have to go to a corner. A has to tell B the worst things, the terrible things that he had done in life. And B has to tell A the terrible things that he had done in his life. Open up, don't hide, don't cover, be frank, be upfront are the teachings that they promote. Or they would call one of the participants after explaining everything. They say, come on. Either a volunteer can come up, or they pick up you, third, second person. Come on, lady, come over and stand on the stage and take the microphone and say openly what has been the blunder in your life. What do you think you have been doing a mistake again and again? Do not hesitate. And it has yielded, they claim, wonderful results. Ordinarily, Everybody wants to know wrongs of others, scandals of others. And one's own mistakes, one says, I better not let anybody know. To conclude the reference to Landmark Foundation's workshops, I am going to say that a word that they use extensively is racket. I have never taken part in Landmark Foundation, but it's interesting that someone who introduced me to J. Krishnamurti went headlong into Landmark Foundation eventually. Somewhere in the mid 80s or early 80s, a friend of mine started talking to me about Krishnaji, and he actually was taking part in Krishnamurti Foundation's retreats or gatherings. The last gathering that J. Krishnamurti held in Varanasi was one of the camps. I guess it was 1985 or so. This friend of mine had joined from south. He had traveled all the way to Varanasi and taken part. He actually later on went headlong into Landmark, first as a student, later as an anchor person, a teacher, an instructor, a facilitator of Landmark programs. So let me say what they mean by racket. The racket could be something you have been hiding, and you think you are very smart by recognizing that you have successfully hidden something terrible that you have been doing and nobody knows. You hide, you have hidden it very carefully. Your own husband may not know, your own neighbor may not know. Somebody who meets me every day and has coffee or tea with you, chats about everything under the sun, does not know this aspect of your life. You have hidden it. Why have you hidden it? Because you are afraid that if I tell this to my spouse, husband or wife, my God, tomorrow onwards, I will be treated differently. I better not let anybody know, etc. In Landmark Foundation, that sort of thing, whether it is to do with money or man or woman or land or cash or what you call some matter, something that you have been hiding, you think you are smart. The truth is, by hiding it with all your strength, you have reinforced the self in you like anything. By being so protective, you have actually not protected, you have actually destroyed yourself. In Ishavasya Upanishad, it is said, someone who does not know one's true nature actually is a suicide case. Ye ke chatmahano atmahanaha. Atmahanaha means one who commits suicide. It's a very strange way in which the Upanishads talks about things. When you do not know, in the Vedanta, there is the concept of the pure self, birthless, deathless, which cannot be cut by a sword, which cannot be made wet by rain, which cannot be burnt by fire. That such things are talked in that literature. There is something in you which is so pure, so divine, so wonderful. But by protecting your self, the little self, this idea of you are this, you are that, that's what we call false prestige. I am good, I am most respectable, and so on and so forth. The statement says, the more you protect the self in you, farther you go from truth. So this also explains why vulnerability, rightly understood, is tantamount to opening the gateway, the wide doors of liberating wisdom. All right, all this is fine. How do we exactly be vulnerable? Vulnerable or vulnerability, I would say, is an expression of advanced intelligence. If we are truly intelligent, we are able to see what these self-protective mechanisms do to us, how they make us live in fear, how they make relationships actually stay strained. It's better to let go of all the defenses and come upon true freedom. How do we come upon this vulnerability? I would submit here that it is only through seeing with all intensity what problems these self-defensive mechanisms are causing to us. It is in a way as simple as why we should let go of falsehood, why we should stop telling lies, why we should let go of dishonesty. Because falsehood, telling lies, dishonesty, being violent, living in hatred, living in intolerance, etc., are all like walls that we build around ourselves. Though letting go of everything may appear to be too far fetched. So many people may say, will I ever be able to let go of? If I let go of this secret of mine, I'm finished. That is already fear. One is so afraid of getting finished. When there is certain awakening of intelligence, one finds that one doesn't really get finished. One's problem gets finished. It is like a great waking up. It is like a tremendous metamorphosis. The larva doesn't perish. The larva literally does not die. The larva gets transformed to a butterfly. Likewise, if you and I can work on discovering order, which is through noticing disorder, agreed, but don't take noticing disorder as, don't take it for granted. Oh, don't say, oh, I don't have to bring order, it seems. I don't have to create order in my life. I don't have to borrow order from anywhere. It's nice to know. All I need to do is be aware of disorder. Ah, that must be easy. No, that looks easy. Just to be aware of disorder. Just be aware of how you are hurting yourself. Just be aware of how thought is constantly adding to your fear. Is apparently easy, but actually it requires integrity. Only when there is integrity, the last obstacles to a dishonest life fall apart. But if you are in your so-called attempt to be honest, if you are not very honest, then it won't work. Therefore, by the way, it is said rightly that in the matter of many of these human values, the means and the end are one only. How do we arrive upon truth? Be truthful. That's how you arrive upon truth. How do you arrive upon compassion? Be compassionate. The answer like that may baffle us. You may even say, that is no answer at all. When we say, how do you become truthful? You say, by being truthful, you become truthful. That's avoiding the issue. It may look like that. But if you have a certain insight into why the answer is given in that way, you will realize that if you bring anything intermediate, a certain artificiality comes about. So, if you are passionate about freedom, you will get freedom. If you are passionate about ending disorder, your disorder will end. What do you mean? Suppose I say to my friends, you know what? I want to end all kinds of disorder, all kinds of contradictions from my life. And then I whisper to my friends, you know, I want to end disorder so that I will be happy. Then you brought something in between. For the sake of happiness, you want to end your disorder. That means you really don't care for the ending of disorder per se. It is a means to another end. Then already there is a certain injustice. You have to smell disorder to be something very foul and not for something else. But disorder is foul, disorder is bad smelling, disorder is intolerable. And I would like to examine this. How did this come? What is this disorder? So, therefore, it is rightly said awareness is the way, awareness is the beginning, the middle, and the end. When they asked Krishnaji, tell us how we may be attentive, how we may come upon wonderful, steady attention. He did not say, eat moderately or sleep a little less or sleep enough. He did not say, something like be in the company of attentive people. Spiritual literature is full of such, pieces of advice. Repeat this mantra and do this pranayama or do that yogasana or fast for a few days. So many things have been, distributed. So many things gurus tell their followers. Krishnaji could have said, in your life, you will have better attention if you conserve your energy. And in order to conserve your energy, look, don't overeat, don't overindulge in any pleasure, blah, blah. He could have said 100 things that would have been very appealing to 99 out of 100 people. But Krishnaji's answer to that question, how do we come upon attention, was attention is the way to attention. I myself had a bit of a difficulty in early days. And then I remember once I had a certain discussion with Kabir Jaitartha. I said, all that this philosophy is good, but we need to do a few exercises. We need to follow some rules. We need to follow some niyamas. We need to follow some, principles that we maybe identify. These are the things I will do for 30 days. And by following certain rules and niyamas and principles, etc., something happens to us. Then we are more attentive, we are aware. We are aware of what we are saying. We are aware of how the other person is affected. We notice her face, his face. Otherwise, we are in our own world. I argued with him and he smiled and he said to me, which I highly appreciate. He said, Chidanandji, I don't say you should not um, eat moderately. I don't say you should eat excessively. You should not care about how much you sleep. I don't say stay in the bed as long as you want, etc. No, that's not the point. But awareness is something, alertness is something he remarked. In awareness, all these things you are talking about will happen on their own. Otherwise, it is putting the cart before the horse, as the idiom goes. When a horse-driven cart is going, First goes the horse, then follows the carriage, right? So in English, they have this idiom, putting the carriage before the horse, putting the cart before the horse. The horse is behind. How can that be? So on this higher plateau of philosophical, you know, deliberation, we discover something beautiful. Rules, techniques, methods, so-called healthy ways of living, etc. The ordinary mind visualizes them to be coming first and enhanced awareness to be coming later. But on a higher plateau, it is awareness which makes you directly perceive one more bite is not right, or killing this animal for my food, something is not okay with it. You become aware, and then you don't hurt, you don't overeat. If you have a quality of awareness, to stay on the bed for even 2 minutes more would be a torture for you. You would say, what am I doing? I'm fresh. I have had enough rest. I think I'm energetic enough. There is no reason under the sun for me to curl up and stay on the bed for some more time and so on. So think about it. Does awareness come first and healthy ways of living follow? Or do healthy ways may be written in some book? These are the 10 healthy habits. These are the things you must do daily, do's and don'ts. Do they come first? And then you are a man or a lady of enhanced awareness. This would be an interesting question to explore. Now, coming back to vulnerability and to say just a few last words, I would say that it is by more and more of being aware of how thought moves, we realize that a self-protective thought, a thought that is going out of its way to protect our image in the eyes of maybe the spouse, maybe the whole town, doesn't matter. All self-defensive, self-protective mechanisms of thought are actually strengthening the prison walls for us. And through intelligence, not in some irresponsible manner. Nobody is saying, go on the rooftop and say, I've decided to be vulnerable. I want to let the whole town know that last month I, you know, in an unfair way, unethical way, um, earned some 10 lakhs of rupees or something. No, but that's all silly, irresponsible ways. That's not the idea of vulnerability. Vulnerability is where actually it is needed, where actually you yourself, your conscience says, I need to be open, I need to be upfront with this lady, with this man, with this child, with that neighbor. I think I don't want to deceive him or her anymore, even for a moment. So you are being vulnerable, you are being open, you are being available for basic radical change, you know, is facilitated by that kind of being open. And it may not, nobody may know except one person, maybe, or even that one person not needed. It's not about numbers. It's not about going on the newspaper or the TV channel to make some kind of confession. That may happen in some cases. But essentially, being vulnerable, being defenseless is coming to a state of mind where you no more, first of all, deceive yourself and therefore do not deceive others too. I guess I have provided some food for thought under this caption. Now the floor is open for all of you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chidanandji, for good lecture. Harshad Parekh sir, would you please unmute and say? Harshad Parekh sir.
Yes. Are you able to hear?
Yeah.
I'll, 1 minute. Yes. Thank you, Swamiji. And I agree with you that awareness or intelligence is necessary to see exactly what are our problems, what are our difficulties, and that. But awareness, awakening is very rare, I feel. And in the commentaries on living, there is an article which is titled "To be vulnerable is to live, to withdraw is to die." And in that, there is one woman, and she had listened to Krishnamurti, and after listening to Krishnamurti, she was very much disturbed. And then again, somebody took her to listen to Krishnamurti, and again, she was very much disturbed because I think she did not have the clarity of her own mind, and she was trying to protect herself from some kind of relationship which would bring hurt. And so she was trying to avoid a relationship, and she was even trying to avoid listening to Krishnamurti. But finally, she again came, and Krishnamurti told her that the more we defend, the more we are attacked. The more we seek security, the less of it there is. The more we want peace, the greater is our conflict. So, and Krishnamurti says, do you see the necessity of being open and vulnerable? So generally what happens that it is very difficult for most people to look at their own self clearly, exactly as we are. And that creates a lot of conflict, a lot of complications, and we build walls around us because we a psychological wall. And so we try to avoid people who are disturbing, but if we don't mind being disturbed and really look at what is behind this disturbance, then there is a possibility of being free. So to come in direct touch with ourselves as we are is a real intelligence. And in such intelligence, then there is no fear of being hurt by somebody, and we can really flower. And even one person had even come to Krishnaji and criticized Krishnamurti and said to Krishnamurti that, sir, you are getting stuck. You are saying the same thing again and again. And Krishnamurti listened to him, and for a week, Krishnamurti looked very deeply within himself whether he was stuck and saying the same thing again and again everywhere, or there was a creativity and something new was coming. So this is a very rare quality of being vulnerability, because there is already the fear exists that if somebody says something, or if I say something about my own weakness, people will make images about me. But these are all imaginations, and our life is lived mostly with this kind of imagination about what other people will think about us. And because we are trying to protect the image which we have built for ourselves. So as long as this image exists, there is the possibility of getting hurt. And even like a teacher, a student tells a teacher something that you have made a mistake, while a teacher is teaching. And if the teacher is vulnerable, he will feel happy that the student has pointed out the mistake. But if the teacher is not vulnerable, then he will feel very bad, he will feel hurt. So these are a real problem in our daily life relationship. And the more we are open and clear, the simple and enjoyable is our relationship with people around and with nature. So it is very, very important to listen to criticism without getting hurt and really look deeply whether it is true or false. And that requires this awareness or intelligence. And because it is very rare, our life is very, very complicated. So I have said enough. Thank you
Thank you very much, Harshad sir. Chhabra sir, Vijay Chhabra sir, Mahatma ji, please unmute and say.
Yeah, hello. Yeah,
Yeah.
namaskar, everybody. Yeah, when when I read the title, that whether it's a virtue, I couldn't connect to it. I was wondering why is it being connect like the vulnerability. What has it to do with virtue? As such? It's a tremendous fact of life. You know, at physical level, at all levels, anything can, physically, mentally, we're all vulnerable. It's a fact of life. Anything can happen anytime. You are walking along the road, you're going for walks, you're, traveling. In your life, you escape accident or the, death or whatever, so you feel, little later anything could have happened actually. I mean, you survived all that. It's a in a way miracle. It just happened that you survived. It's such a tremendous, anybody can say you, and of course, if you have balloons built up, prick will come. And so I was saying there's a virtue part of it, That's my. I mean, is it something that we feel it's desirable? One should be vulnerable. The fact of life, then we can only fight against it, or we probably, it's like breaking one's head against the wall and bleed. Yes, one can do that. Remember that bleeding is the consequence. There's no way to. Is there any way to escape it? It's such a, that's about it very strongly. So I was wondering, how does one connect it to something? It's a question of being desirable, not desirable. It's a fact of life. It's simply there. And that is beauty. I mean, if you look at anything, a baby, a car, anything can get destroyed so easily. And in life, a little bit here and there, you travel with your sword and a little strip. You down in the river, or anything can happen. I was just wondering what being something of virtue. I was not able to connect to that. So you know, go with Swamiji, maybe I'm missing a point there, you know. I see it as a tremendous fact of life with its danger and with its beauty. Just that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Dinesh Waghmare, please unmute.
Are you able to listen to me, sir?
Yeah, very well, sir.
Today's topic is really very tricky and very strange and very difficult, because when I have gone through the JK literature, my understanding is he has used this word for in a different way altogether, and he has equated it with the 9 words. What are those 9 words? Actual dictionary meaning, Swamiji has already told, that the quality of state of being exposed to the possibility of being attacked. But JK has used this and equated it with the number 1, sensitivity. He has said that you have to be extremely sensitive. So first is sensitivity. Let me first say what are those 9 words. Sensitivity, then openness to everything, means in this polar world of duality, openness to everything. Then third, acceptance to every stimulus, external stimulus. Third is acceptance. Fourth is innocency of mind. Your mind should be so much innocence that it should accept every attack or every stimulus or every challenge or whatever it is. Then fifth word is utter nakedness. He has used the word utter nakedness. Sixth, he has used uncertainty. You should be in a position to accept all the uncertainty. Seventh, he has used it for wisdom. If you go through the literature of teaching of JK, he has used 7th meaning as wisdom. 8th is total freedom. He has equated it with total freedom also. 9th, he has equated it with love. It is very strange. He has equated it with love. And 10th meaning, Swamiji has given advanced intelligence. So this word is supposed to be the most dangerous word as far as I am concerned. Now, what he said, that what are his some statements. Sensitivity implies being vulnerable. He said sensitivity implies being vulnerable. Next, he said that also means not to have any resistance to anything. Resistance for not to be hurt, resistance to safeguard, self-centered, self-interest, etc., etc. So one should not pose any resistance to any self-centered activity or self-interest, etc. Then openness to everything means open to all polarities. One should be able to see beauty and ugly, or he should be able to take beauty and ugly same, in the same way. He should accept both, that both are, he should not have any reaction to ugliness and acceptance to beauty. He should accept both as same. Means he should have acceptance to everything. Then he should accept physical pain also with pleasure. Both he should be, the person should be able to take both pain as well as pleasure equally. Then this also automatically means whether it is a psychological pain or sorrow or grief, etc., he should be in a position to take it equally with the pleasure. Next, he says innocency. He says that sense of having no defense, no pretensions, no mask, no pretensions, no mask to personality. Then he said sensitivity, vulnerability is a total process. It is a total process. Now it can happen only when there is total freedom, utter nakedness of your whole being, utter nakedness of your whole being. Then he says, love, it is a state of intense vulnerability. He said, love, it is a state of intense vulnerability. Next, he said, complete vulnerability is wisdom. Complete vulnerability is wisdom. He has also said, to be uncertain to be uncertain is to be in a state of vulnerability. So if all these things or these 9 words or whatever implied in these 9 words are there in a state of being of a person, then only we can say that he is vulnerable. That is very interesting. Then, so can any person have all those things? As Swamiji said, only that advanced intelligence if is having with the advanced intelligence or with he is having the total freedom, or he is having he is with the intelligence, or he is having that the dimension which is beyond. He has touched that dimension. I think that then only he can be vulnerable. Thank you.
Harshad Parekh, sir.
Yeah. May I
Harshad, sir.
say?
Do you
Yeah.
want to say something? Yes, sir.
Yes, what Dinesh ji talked about, describing vulnerability with many different words, many different qualities. And Dinesh ji uses the word should. One should have this, one should have that. But Krishna ji doesn't talk about this word should, but what is. So what requires is to see whatever is within us exactly as it is, and that is intelligence, and that intelligence or awareness reveals all our problems, and we can really see, and then there is a possibility of being free. But saying that one should have openness, one should have this, it becomes very theoretical, I feel. So that is what I have to say. Thank you.
Prasad, sir.
Sir, firstly, I am sorry I missed Swamiji's talk, but I have heard Parekh ji and also Mr. Waghmare. Mr. Waghmare has given all the qualities that are implied in vulnerability. I mean, when you analyze, it may look complicated, but otherwise, vulnerability means simply sensitivity, being sensitive and open. Normally, we are not sensitive. So to that extent, we are not vulnerable. When you see a flower, we are not sensitive. We just, we see it and go by. And similarly, inwardly, also we are not vulnerable. Most of us are very brittle. Brittle in the sense, we don't have the malleability in us. We don't have that flexibility in us to tolerate some criticism. Supposing somebody says something against us, we immediately react instead of really absorbing it and seeing whether there is any truth in it and like that. So vulnerability is the essence of Krishnaji's teaching, because he wants you to be sensitive, he wants you to be perceptive, watchful, observant. All these qualities are implied in the teaching of Krishnaji. And so to that extent, vulnerability, if we analyze it, like Mr. Waghmare has said, it may look complicated, but otherwise it only means to be tender, not hard, not rigid, not being a fighting cock, you know, not being all that. So it is a very virtuous quality. There is no denying it. It is virtue incarnate. So the entire Krishnaji's teaching encompasses the entire existence, human existence. So you have to be like an absorbing paper, absorbent paper. You have to soak in the world. That is how I feel about the teaching of Krishnaji. It is virtue, unadulterated virtue to me, for me. Thank you, sir.
Rama Rao, sir.
Sir, vulnerability, the moment I hear that, I felt it is a state of dynamic. From small, minute particle, electron to universe, it is a totally in a dynamic state. That is in vulnerability. It has its own order. So, vulnerability, I feel it is a fundamental nature of the existence. What makes this the disturbance of what makes this vulnerability in obstruction, so that one has to find out. That simple submission I want to make it. Or sir.
Anand, sir.
Yes, sir. So, I mean, when I look at the word vulnerability, I immediately begin to interpret that. I want to know what it means. And we come with all kinds of explanation. That there has to be freedom, there has to be passion, there has to be intelligence, there has to be awareness. The moment I use those words, again, I'm lost. I'm caught in those words. Can I look at that is the question. Now, as Kay also has mentioned, I mean, when there is sensitivity, there is vulnerability. Now, how do I understand that is the question. To be sensitive is to be vulnerable. Now, life is full of insecurity. Functionally, I need to protect myself. I need to ensure there is security for my life. That is very essential part of my life. Now, that which turns into psychological, it becomes a huge challenge. So now we always seem to be getting caught between the functional and psychological aspect of it. Now, when someone is talking about sensitivity and vulnerability, can there be vulnerability without being sensitive? Now, how does that person explain what sensitivity is? Sensitivity is there when he says there's care. When I care for something, when there is affection, I have affection. When there is compassion, when there is love, that is what I seem to understand within quotes. When he's talking about sensitive, do I care what's happening out there? Is there any affection for the thing which is being hurt or that is being killed? We just talk about it. We talk about what is happening. We talk about the wars, the killings which is going on, and animals being killed. But I just only use words, which is coming out of me. I'm not sensitive about it. I want to say I'm sensitive. I want to pretend I'm sensitive. But is it so? I say I should be aware. This intelligence operates. When is intelligence going to operate? When are you going to be aware is a question. Someone says awareness and intelligence and wisdom. I use those words. Fundamentally, do I understand? Am I a sensitive being? I don't want to say a human being. I'm a sensitive being. Is what I need to look at it. Do I care for things, what is happening out there? Inside here, in me and out there? Do I have affection for it? Do I really love it? Do I love those things? Or whatever it is? Is there love for it? Is what I need to look at it. As long as that I'm psychologically, I'm trying to protect myself. I'm seeking security. I cannot be vulnerable. I cannot be sensitive. To be vulnerable is essential for me to be sensitive. I'm again putting within quotes, must be. I have to use words to communicate. So without sensitivity, there's no vulnerability. So how do I look at that as a question? I talk about awareness, I talk about intelligence, I talk about wisdom, I talk a lot of things. But I'm not sensitive human, I'm not a sensitive being. Can I see that as a question? I'm not saying I should be sensitive. Then again, I'm lost. Can I observe that I'm an insensitive being is what is essential. It's there in front of me. I don't even want to look at it. Over, sir.
Pradeep Verma, sir.
Yes, sir. Am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Very beautifully dealt, a very definitely a very complicated issue. Chhabra ji raised a number of points. Then Dinesh also raised almost like the effect of Navgrahas, 9 different meanings used by JK for the same word vulnerability. And then Anand also talked about a lot about sensitivity, pliability, and a number of other things. To me, whether this inquiry is not by a self, I'm using small self, who is looking for virtue. Virtue is a word in the field of morality and ethics, and definitely belongs to our psychology and what should be. Although it is very easy to say a different word for should be. To be sensitive, to be perceptive, to be tender. Instead of should be, we are using to be. It doesn't matter. You see, it is the same thing. There is a motive. Immediately some motive comes, something comes, some rewarding thing comes. And then what should be, it involves thinking mind and judging mind. We cannot deny it. Then certain questions, small questions. Can one choose to be defenseless? Then whether being is controllable, and if yes, by what? Then so easily we corner and brand self as the main culprit. So easily we corner and brand self as the main culprit, as if we know the limits of self, as if we know the limits of self, my own limits, forget about people in general. You see, so these are the small questions. Otherwise, mind-body complex developed its own defense system during its evolutionary development around survival. A process still on with that additional support from advances in medical sciences. With the development of reflective consciousness and the self, so it is still, we all are still daily struggling against ever new challenges. So we are definitely vulnerable. When you can feel it, then you are vulnerable and sensitive enough to know that it's a new challenge. Today, this moment, this day. So we can go on using different words and we can go on denying word as word is not the thing, because that great Mahavakya is there. But we go on shuffling words from this to that, to this to that, and denying. But where are we right now? So these things are, these are certain very subtle questions coming to me. I always find a motive behind all these things. You say, I am a narrow self, but I know it. I know it. I know the narrowness of myself and the expansion of myself to some extent. So these are the small questions. Everybody has touched more or less. Most of the things have been touched. So it's not that easy that if you tell, be vulnerable and that you are out. No, life is not that easy at all. Daily a new challenge, which you feel means you are vulnerable. Then something happens to you in mind-body complex. So this is what I feel, friends. This is all I have to share. Thank you very much.
Shakti ji. Shakti ji, please unmute.
जी जी आवाज आ रही है मेरी?
Yes,
Yes.
जी, ये जो वल्नरेबल शब्द है, इसका एक अर्थ तो ये होता है कि कोई आदमी एक ऐसी, कोई व्यक्ति एक ऐसी स्थिति में है कि अब उस पे कोई भी व्यक्ति हमला कर सकता है। एक तो उसका उस तरह का अर्थ होता है, एक दूसरा अर्थ ये भी उसका होता है कि प्रतिरोध, रेजिस्ट नहीं करना किसी चीज को। जैसे बहुत तेज हवाएं चल रही हैं तो कुछ पेड़ ऐसे होते हैं वो झुक जाते हैं, जिसको हम हिंदी में नमनीयता कहते हैं, वो झुक गए और फिर उसके बाद हवा चली। तो और जहां तक ये जो वर्चू शब्द है, इसका जो कैन बीइंग डिफेंसलेस बी ए वर्चू, ये जो सवाल आता है, तो वर्चू के अंदर जो मुझे उसमें जो मीनिंग नजर आता है वो ये है कि जो चीज हमारी जिंदगी में इल्यूजन पैदा करती हो, जो हमारी जिंदगी में और ज्यादा कंफ्यूजन क्रिएट करती हो, वो वर्चू नहीं है, वो उसका उल्टा है। तो ये जो रेजिस्ट ना करना है, या दूसरे शब्दों में जिसे हम कहें कि जो व्हाट इज है उसके साथ रहना। और एक छोटी सी बात याद आ जाती है, संजीव राव जी की किताब है, उसमें उन्होंने एक जगह लिखा है कि राजघाट में थे वो लोग, रात को कुत्ते भौंक रहे थे, तो उन्होंने कृष्णमूर्ति से अगले दिन कहा कि बहुत कुत्ते भौंक रहे थे। तो कृष्णमूर्ति ने कहा आप ऐसा करना, अब सुनना उनको, जब कुत्ते भौंके, और सुनना और देखना क्या होता है ना। तो आमतौर से हमारा जो रेजिस्टेंस होता है वो विचारों के माध्यम से होता है। तो क्या उस रेजिस्टेंस को ये देखा जा सकता है कि वो रेजिस्टेंस ना हो? तो इस तरह से वो चीज कहीं ना कहीं एक ऐसे एरिया में आ जाती है जहां पर, जिसे हम कहें कि एक्सपेरिमेंटेशन का एरिया, बिना ये कहे कि ये सही है या गलत है, हम अपनी जिंदगी में उसको देख सकते हैं। थैंक यू सर।
दिनेश जी।
शक्ति जी ने बहुत अच्छी बात बोली है। मैं यहाँ पर सिर्फ इतना कहना चाह रहा हूँ कि अगर हम सब इन बातों को दरकिनार
दिनेश जी, दिनेश जी,
Yes.
can you speak in English for some time?
Okay,
Shakti ji has said in Hindi. If you can speak in English, so
okay.
to be familiar
See,
with what
leave aside whatever we have discussed so far. Can we see one thing very clearly, that I am having my limitations as an ego, as a body, as a mind, as a spirit. I am having my own individuality, and I am having my own security requirements. I am having my own defense requirements, etc., because I am inadequate, or I am having a less capacity, or my capacity is limited. Now, the way Krishnamurti has used this word, vulnerability, and the meaning implied in it, is standing exactly opposite to it. Whatever the defensive requirements are there, the word is standing exactly opposite to it. So that's why I was wondering whether one can have such state of mind which can accept all those, he can remove his all defenses and accept all those things which JK is saying. This is only possible when he is enlightened. That's what my views are. What Harshad sir has to say?
Yeah. Yes. Yes, the question is, what prevents us to be sensitive and vulnerable? I think because we have a strong sense of self, the image, and we don't want that image to be disturbed. So when somebody says something very unpleasant, we resist it because that image gets hurt. So if we can have real freedom, as you say, that yes, it requires freedom to listen, to look, to do anything. It requires freedom. And without that, this self has a tendency to protect itself, and then there is no possibility of being really happy. And so real happiness, freedom comes when we begin to see ourselves as we are and not trying to hide behind the mask. And general tendency people is that they try to project themselves different than what they are. And so there is a conflict between what is and what one would like to show it to other people. So, yes, I agree with you that it requires ability to see things as they are. What we are is more important than what we would like to be. And if we can see exactly what we are, then that is a real awareness or intelligence. And you can say it is the freedom, happiness, and life becomes much enjoyable and simpler if we don't get disturbed. So sometimes before I talked in the junior school assembly, and in that I described one event, one experience in the classroom. One boy was teasing one girl in class 7 mathematics class, and the girl was crying, and the boy was taking a lot of pleasure. So I told the girl, just ignore, don't take it very seriously, because when we get hurt, then we are damaging ourselves. So there is one song which I told also, बात बात में रूठो ना, अपने आप को लूटो ना, ये रंग बदलती दुनिया है, तकदीर से अपनी रूठो ना. That means don't get upset about small things. And if you get upset, you are damaging you are punishing yourself. But if you can listen to the criticism or teasing and see that it is true or false, then life becomes much easier. And if it is false, then you can say, sorry, it is not true. And if it is true, you say, thank you for telling me. So it requires openness to see ourselves as we are and not hiding behind the mask and try to show something other than what we are. So that is very rare quality. And people who are vulnerable in that sense, then they don't get hurt. But I like to say that this is true individually, but as a nation, if a country is vulnerable, then it will be attacked by the neighboring countries. Like Tibet was defenseless and China invaded, and the Dalai Lama had to leave the country, come to India. Similarly, India was attacked by China. So we are talking about the individual sense, but it doesn't work on the scale of politics and the nation. One has to be strong and not defenseless. Okay, I have finished. Yeah.
Can I come in, sir?
Yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah. So, I mean, we seem to be understanding the word vulnerability. Krishnamurti says, in vulnerability, we are most powerful. How do I look at that is a question. Then again, when I talk about the individual, when I talk about the nation, again, I'm back to my conditioning. There are quite a few countries in the world who don't have armies. I need to look at that. And you see the armies, what have done to the planet Earth. It is destroying. We need to understand that. The moment I say it's necessary, I say it's required. The other, my neighbor says also it's required. You see what's happening. So it is back to my conditioning when I say nations are required for the armies and things like that. I mean, I think I've fallen back to my conditioning. Now, what Krishnamurti is talking about vulnerability is something I need to look at. It not vulnerability means I'm accepting whatever happens to me. It is not the case. He says you're most powerful when you're vulnerable. How do I look at that is very essential, sir. Over, sir.
Can I say something here?
Yeah, Ben. Please go ahead.
Anand sir, that's why I think JK has also used the word wisdom. He has equated this with wisdom. If my neighboring country is keeping the army and I am not keeping, is there any wisdom in that?
Sir,
So it is. I mean, that will go somewhere. That's back. I'm back to my conditioning where I say army is required or not required. I'm not saying it should be there. It should not be there. Can I see what armies have done to the planet, to the earth, and to the people? We need to look at it. The number of people have killed. What is that we have learned is the question. That is one. So when I say it is required, can I see I'm back to my conditioning is what we need to look at it. Now, Krishnamurti is talking about vulnerability. We are interpreting that according to conditioning once again. I purposely brought in because he says being vulnerable is you're being. I mean, it's you're being very powerful. I mean, that is what it says. It says being vulnerable. I mean, it's it's the most powerful thing. How do I understand that? Not have armies or don't have armies. That's a different issue. When somebody somebody comes and hits me, at that moment I know there's an action. But if I say if somebody is going to come and hit me, I have to be prepared and this and that, then again I'm lost. Krishnamurti also spoke about it. So when somebody says somebody was going to come and hit you, what will he do? He says it'll happen. It'll happen then. I don't have to think about it now. So that is what is essential.
Yeah, I understood. You mean this vulnerability neither means foolishness nor unawareness.
Wisdom does mean anything else? Wisdom does mean anything else other than this?
Yes. Jain sir,
I think one has to be
right.
really sensitive, sir. I come back to it again and again because we are insensitive beings. We are. What is happening out there? I say this should be there, that should not be there. That it is ugly, it should not be there. This is beautiful, that should be there. You see, that's how my mind works. I want something which is very pleasant, the one that is beautiful. The ugly things I don't want to watch. Even there are certain worms and certain insects, or cockroaches. You see, they are ugly. I mean, that is my conditioning. Why do I say that's ugly? So ugly and beautiful, I need to look at again. It's back from a conditioning. See how strongly we are conditioned. I need to observe that. It's not that change should come about. The moment this change should come about, then I'm lost. Can I see when I'm seeing something, it may be the most beautiful thing, but I call it ugly. That's my conditioning. The creatures with so many legs, it's about 3-4 inches. The moment people see it's coming near, they jump up. I say it's ugly, but it could be the most beautiful thing. That is what is essential for us to know. When we're talking about vulnerability, I need to look from, the moment I interpret, I'm back to my conditioning. Can I remain with what vulnerability means? What Kay is talking about, it's the most powerful thing. How do I understand that? Oh, sir.
Shaktiji, would you please unmute and say, after that, Harshad sir. Shaktiji first and then Harshad sir.
Shakti please unmute. Shakti
To be vulnerable, I have unmuted, sir.
Yes, sir.
My voice is coming?
Yeah, we are listening. Okay.
Yeah. The what I receive from this word to be vulnerable in Krishnaji's context is that, you see, suppose I get disturbed and I resist that disturbance. How do I resist? Through thought or through escaping from it. I get bored and I resist by some action or some thought. So this not resisting to what is, that is the meaning I receive from the word being vulnerable in Krishnamurti's context. Thank you, sir.
थैंक यू वेरी मच, थैंक यू वेरी मच। ये टैंक आगे बढ़े कि पीछे हटे, कोख तो माँ की बंजर हुई जाती है, वो जमीन भी बंजर हो जाती है और किसी न किसी माँ की कोख बंजर होती है, चाहे इधर का हो चाहे उधर का हो। तो वो जो आनंद सर बोल रहे थे वो तो वास्तविकता है, दैट इज रियलिटी। हर्षद सर, हर्षद सर।
Yes, Krishna ji can say many things, but we have to see whether it is true for ourselves. So, to be vulnerable, it means to be really free to see things as they are. And that as long as we are having many problems, we are not very clear, then it is very difficult to understand Krishnamurti. Because to understand Krishnamurti, we have to look at our own daily life activities and in the relationship that we can understand. So I have not accepted everything what Krishna ji has said as true and then try to follow Krishnamurti, but I look within myself and then I see that yes, what Krishnamurti said is true, then I say yes, he is saying true. So one needs the sensitivity or vulnerability or freedom or wisdom, whatever word we use, it has to be there in our mind, our looking. Otherwise, we will keep on asking the same question again and again. Can I look at it? So when a question is very genuine, then the mind really stops and it begins to look with curiosity. Otherwise, it can become a habit to ask the same question again and again and doubt oneself. So the whole thing requires curiosity, honesty, intensity. All these qualities are required to look at ourselves as we are and not accepting what Krishnamurti says and then follow Krishnamurti. That means to be not following Krishnamurti, because Krishnamurti also says, don't accept what I am saying. You find out from your own daily life of living whether what he says is true or false. So, okay, I have said enough.
Can I come on it on this?
Yes, sir, briefly, sir.
Yeah. So Krishnamurti saw things as they are. I mean, he was very, very little. Conditioning was very little. Most of us are very strongly conditioned. So what he saw was things as they were, as they are. Okay. And from that, he spoke. It is not Krishnamurti who is speaking or is an individual. We are looking at him or trying to follow him or imitate him or, I say some ways I agree with him, some ways I disagree with him. The moment I say I agree with him and some ways I disagree with him, I'm back to my conditioning. It's nothing to agree with Krishnamurti or to disagree with Krishnamurti. What Krishnamurti saw as it was, he described it. That's all there is. That is that is what he said. That is the truth. What is, when you remain with it, undergoes a transformation, a change. He says that could be God, that could be truth, that could be wisdom. So I am trying to look at what he's talking about. There's no question of following him, and it is not Krishnamurti's. It is nothing of that is Krishnamurti's. What is happening out there, that's being described. That's all there is. And he says description is not that described. So Krishnamurti we may have come across thousands and thousands of years back. There may have been some other person who saw things as they are, and then he had spoken out of it. I don't know about it, but here is a person who sees things as they are without the conditioning playing a role. That's all there is. Can I observe my conditioning is interfering with my observation, with my perception, with whatever I see, whatever I say, whatever I do. The moment I say it should not, I'm back to my conditioning. The moment I say this is what Krishnamurti is saying, I'm back to my conditioning. The moment I say what Krishnamurti is saying is the truth, I'm back to my conditioning. I'm making them authority. Authority is at violence. Imitation is a form of violence. I'm trying to imitate Krishnamurti all the time. It's a form of violence. Whatever he does, I do the same thing. The way I walk, the way I talk, the way I go about and seeing people and talking to people and having walks in the gardens and things like that, that's an imitation. I'm trying to do what he's doing. He says that's a form of violence. Do I look at that as a question? Oh, sir.
Sir, you suggested that one has to
Krishnamurti's life
one has to taste in one's own life.
Yeah.
Jain sir.
Yeah.
Everybody has suggested
his own life and his own destiny.
Own life
own
and
way.
test it out.
Modak's
Test
life
it
is
out the
Modak's
truth
life,
of the thing.
Krishnamurti's life is Krishnamurti's life.
Definitely. Definitely. And we should be open. We should be open to things coming to us.
Definitely.
Not resist it, not reject it, but we accept.
Right. With this, let us end it. So
Yes,
please end it, Modak.
Thanks all. Thanks
Thank
the speaker.
you. Thank you.
Thanks all participants.
Yeah.